becomes difficult because there will always be questions to the motives, and there will always be questions of if this is better or that is better. And I do feel as though in our society, as in many others, we're not immune to this phenomenon, but I wonder if we tolerate it too much. Or rather, even if it's done around the world in other countries, big and small, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's acceptable or it's correct or it's proper. That we will be so afraid of change, and more importantly, we will be so unwilling to strive to do better, even if it's more difficult, even if it takes more effort. Even at times if it might cost more, but in this case, you do better, it should save in the long run. But I don't know what is the correct action. I just find it's kind of silly. It's not as though Carnival is a flash in the pan, 2 days and that's it. There's more to Carnival than that, but maybe I'm wrong. And I do remember next to Napa, there were plans for a center there, a complex, a cultural center, a carnival center, what have you. And I do think it was such a shame that we got Napa and we didn't get that. I don't think we really needed Napa, but I think if Carnival is so important to us, if our Carnival is one of the things that puts us on the map, we treat it like a second-class citizen, even to, I don't know. Anyway, that's just my musings as I was driving around Savannah. You know, the scene of Ameda last weekend. Let's start off today's daily review. So the PM, the Prime Minister, he is defending himself by stating that he will defend himself over an editorial made, and of course one daily newspaper decided to report on the editorial of another daily newspaper, and the fact that the Prime Minister took umbrage to that editorial. And of course, this is about the townhouse. I find this situation uniquely fascinating because of all the things that the Prime Minister has done that seems he cannot shake, he cannot get away from, he cannot escape. This townhouse fiasco, to me, should not be at the top of the list. At the top of the list of the things that I want to get clarified, that I want to get investigated, this is not there. It's something that should not be swept under the rug, but apparently it had 3 investigations, which could imply a lot of different things. But it's one of the things that actually has had investigations. We might not like the result. We might not believe the result. I don't have enough information to make a determination on my opinion on the results. Just that 3 investigations is kind of odd. But there are other things. I mean, ANV drilling, that's one. There's a lot of other things that we would like transparency, we would like as the public to get more information on. Exactly what was the whole point of withdrawing the merit list? What is in the Stanley John report on that issue? What is in the Commission of Inquiry on Paria? What is in the Commission of Inquiry on CRICO? There's a lot of things that the Prime Minister is tangential to that other people are involved in. We'll get into that later, that we would like to know of. This thing with the townhouse, and it has the story, the real meat of the story, I believe, is with regards to the Integrity Commission itself. And if we have faith in how it is operating, and then what is the potential cause of its lack of results or issues. One of the things that has come out recently, which I did not necessarily mention yesterday, is the fact of a funding issue, right? I believe it is implied that, or the Commission expressed their concern, this is what it was stated in the latest report, that it may not be able to effectively function if this trend continues. Speaking about the funding or the reduction or lack of funds. Here's the thing though, name me one aspect of government, except I think maybe like the actual office of the Attorney General, or certain ministries, okay, they don't necessarily have as much complaints, but for the most part, what aspect really is fully funded? Education is not, national security is not, the TTPS is not, the fire service is not, the DPP's office is not. Potentially, our transportation system is not. Works and transport for road repairs was definitely not, because there was 1 year, I think it was 21, where it seemed as though there was no road repairs done. And then, or maybe 22, and then last year, all of a sudden, money was released. Local government at times don't even get their whole allocation. And of course, Tobago has been complaining about its allocation, even though technically they haven't been cut. The Integrity Commission is concerned because when you look at the figures that they released, it is less than it was before. So now we at the outside looking in, we have to ask, what does this mean? Because to be fair, we have similar concerns about the DPP's office being understaffed and potentially underfunded, with money being wasted on a building that the DPP himself did not see as secure enough. And given the current climate, can you blame him? Because if a police station ain't secure enough, if a deputy commissioner of prisons could be attacked. But it's interesting, so we have this here, and now, of course, we have to ask questions with regards to the prioritization. That is what I believe it is. The prioritization, and we on Talking Point have had issues with the government's prioritization of its resources, right? Now, I believe one former minister in the Ministry of Finance, he did say that he thinks maybe Coleman Byrd might have been the only man that could have cut costs, but Mr. Prime Minister, this is where I have to ask, where is the vision? Where is the plan? Because if we have a problem with crime and potentially corruption, you know, everybody kind of talks around that within Parliament. They don't necessarily, you know, they point fingers, but, you know, they don't realize that when you point a finger, 3 fingers are pointing back at you. But we don't actually get anything done, right? And this budgetary concern for the Integrity Commission, for the Office of the DPP, these are big deals. This is not, oh, my food card program, then you get funds. And to a lot of people, that might be more important to them. They depend on that to eat. And in the short run, I could understand that. But in the long run, the damage done by an Integrity Commission or the Office of the DPP or other important institutions like that being underfunded, well, perhaps we're seeing some of that now, where we have a singular incident of which the Prime Minister has provided a defense, of which I myself, I don't know what the technical requirements are. It could just be that it's a technicality and he declared what he had to declare, right? Based on how he presented it, that's what he said. But it caused 3 investigations to be done. The soon-to-be outgoing chairman said, well, listen, it's not as though I interfere in these things. The commission does it, right? He doesn't dictate on policy, on what we investigate and how, et cetera, et cetera. And 3 separate investigations with the same results, and it's almost as though they get the result, they're not happy with the result, let's investigate again. Like, what's going on here? Of course, the DPP situation, we understand with crime, but with this Integrity Commission situation now, we have to ask, how much do we trust what's going on with integrity of our office holders? I don't know. And it's interesting that the Prime Minister now is, I guess, the poster boy, the example being touted with regards to the issues, and maybe it's good political maneuvering by the opposition for once, I don't know. But I find it interesting that, you know, it's going to be pegged all on him when the chairman of the Integrity Commission or the Integrity Commission itself has been criticized not just by the government and the PNM, but also by the opposition. Just always remember that. It's not as though the opposition has been cheering on the Integrity Commission for the entire time, happy with everything that they do, because there have been instances where they themselves have been under the spotlight. Now, let's move on. Speaking about the opposition, and you know what they say, a broken clock is right twice a day. And I will never say that the opposition does not have good points and make good points. Beyond the fact that there are people in the opposition who I don't have an issue with. I like to talk to them. I like to hear what they have to say. I find they have good things to say. You know, even the opposition leader at times says things, and maybe it's because of the situation, how far it's come. It's hard to disagree with her, whether you generally support her or not. That's the thing about being objective. It doesn't matter. I don't need to be her supporter to listen to what she has to say and have no issue with it. And this time, she's gone on to say, once again, let's fire the Minister of National Security and the Commissioner of Police. That's the opposition leader right there. And the opposition has said, fire Hines, fire Dial Singh, fire Imbert, fire Rowley, fire this one, fire that one, fire, 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 fire. The sad part about it is, even though we've reached a point where I could understand, yes, fire the minister, fire the commissioner of police. I could understand the calls. I think they're reasonable. I'm more leaning towards, because I don't know if we're going to get an improvement with regards to the minister, but the role of the commissioner is so important, in my opinion, much more with regards to crime fighting on an immediate basis, right, than the Minister of National Security. And the performance from the current commissioner is lackluster. That I can't fault the opposition leader here for making that statement. The thing is, the opposition has made statements like this for so long and so often. Does anybody care? You look at it, right? You see where we've come with crime. And she's right, 15 murders in the first week. So that's over 2 murders a day, which was more or less the pace we were on last year, January, even though we fell short of the record just by 30. It was still 575, as reported. My co-host Keaton Shaw always says that we know of. Bear that in mind. I don't know what the statistics are of missing people who never get found. Are they victims of human trafficking? More on that in a bit. Or are they victims of a murder and we just never find them again? Now, the UNC has brought up the fact that, yes, the crime talks are not happening. And they brought up the fact that, yes, they want to have a meaningful dialogue with the government about crime. I am skeptical that either side wants that, because they put their excuses in place before, and I said this, right? Maybe not as assertively, but I saw it coming. Both sides prepped their excuses in advance. But they will have a town hall meeting on January 15th at the La Jolla Complex, St. Joseph. Former COP Gary Griffith, former Government Minister Ralph Maraj, and the political scientist from the University of West Indies, Dr. Indira Rampasad, will be leading the conversation on that meeting. That's fine. I'm someone who, I don't know how much will come of that, but for one of our callers who wants a symposium on crime, this might not necessarily be what you want, but it's a start. And I think it's still an opportunity. It's a platform, hopefully for the public, to voice concerns. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfectly addressed here. But if the public voices their concerns and makes it apparent, listen, we have issues, uses the platform to make it public, it doesn't mean that the discussion has to end here with this one initiative. So that said, I can't fault the opposition for doing this. They did say they would do it. I don't know if anything will come from it, but participating in it could be a first step that we, the people, could then take the ball and roll with it further on if the politicians drop the ball. There's a lot of ways this could play out. But again, I just want to say, you cry wolf, and eventually when the wolf comes, Peter, no one will believe you. Well, I hate to say this, but I think the opposition has more or less reached that point a while ago. And I get it. The sentiment is there amongst the public. But now with the opposition saying it, it doesn't really carry any weight. And in some ways, it might even kill the message and do the reverse. Because it will just embolden the supporters of the government and the status quo. Meanwhile, the people who actually want change will kind of hear the murmurings and say, yeah, we've heard all of that before from you. It might even make them doubt their own position. All right, next story. This one is interesting. Speaking about crime, speaking about human trafficking. And by the way, before I move on to the next story, one of the things I wanted to say about crime, there's an interesting story in one of the daily newspapers about a school more or less being a victim of break-ins, to the point where it's concerning the parents. They're potentially keeping their children from home. Stuff has been stolen from the school. Intruders, trespassers have come in the school, I believe, during school hours when the children are there. At a time when I have concerns about children being victims of crime, violent crime, this is not something. Religious sites are no longer sacred. Institutions of government authority are no longer sacred, apparently, maybe. And now schools, the institutions that safeguard our children. Well, the children themselves, in some measure, were no longer sacred, and now we have to consider what's going on at schools. All right, next story. Because I said about human trafficking, about people that go missing. Well, in the reverse, I believe, because there are concerns about human trafficking from Venezuela to Trinidad. And in Venezuela, a 24-year-old man nicknamed El Teletubby, I have no idea if it's any reference to the kids program, from yesteryear. He has been arrested in Venezuela for human trafficking and arms trafficking in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is something of a big deal. Apparently, he's the intermediary that the people and illegal contraband is given to him, and he ferries them, I believe, into Trinidad. And the Venezuelan authorities arrested him. One of the things that caught my attention, first of all, is, somebody was arrested for arms trafficking into Trinidad. Usually, we might get the guns, we don't get the people, right? And one of the things to remember is, now we're not hearing about a lone gunman with a pistol shooting somebody with about 5 bullets and may or may not have killed him. Now what we're hearing is, more often than not, the escalation, it started off with the Pennywise robbery in a spectacular fashion, and it has continued, I believe, despite the fact that the perpetrators of that crime were caught. I'm not too sure if they have been prosecuted yet, but multiple rifles, fully automatic, spraying down targets with rifle high-powered ammunition. This is a different level of violence than what we had 5 years ago, right? And the need now to have significant consequences for the people involved with bringing the guns in. Not just, you brought guns in and we got it, so you no longer have it. You lost some of your illegal money. It's illegal money. As much as it might annoy criminals, in a lot of cases, they'll figure out a way to recover from that. What we need to get proper consequences is to actually arrest these individuals. And it's interesting that Venezuela was able to do it. We generally tend to be unable to do it. Now, he's still a middleman to some extent, right? He might have some authority, he might have some power, but he's not one of the big boys. So this is not necessarily going to make that big of a dent in the grand scheme of things, unless it's a sign of things to come. However, it could always be that he ran afoul of somebody and he was a sacrificial piece. And it will end with him, and it won't go any further. All right, next story, quick. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Amy Wrong, he had to clarify after, I believe, Guyana's President Irfan Ali made a statement about a regional company for a regional ferry service between Guyana, Trinidad, and Barbados. And Dr. Brown, he had to clarify that, no, it's still in, we're still having talks about it. A company was not formed in order to get this rolling. As an initiative, I think it's very interesting. We rely on air travel, which is more expensive in some ways than sea travel, and it's more inefficient with regards to carrying cargo. Of course, we rely on air travel for passengers. I do believe we rely on sea cargo to ferry goods between the islands. To some extent, this could be not just opening opportunities for cheaper travel by regional citizens amongst the various islands. And the thing is, it's kind of like GATE. If we then figure out ways to take advantage of such a new service, it might seriously benefit our economies. But if we just have this thing and we don't actually use it, it might just be an expense that provides us with nothing. But Dr. Brown also pointed out, I believe, to the fact that this could also help deal with regional food security, which I think is also one of the things we do have to consider. This initiative if it can be done and done well, and that's always, implementation is always an issue, at least for us. I don't know about the rest of the Caribbean, but at least for us, right? Integrated food security, I think, is one of the things that the Caribbean has to look at more. And in the case of Guyana, yeah, they have the oil and gas and what have you. But it's going to take a lot of effort for Guyana to develop. And eventually they might become a powerhouse with the amount of land they have, with the amount of natural resources there. That's true. But in the meantime, the rest of the Caribbean still needs to participate, at the very least, in a network to distribute this, right? And if we could make it, if we could build it up, make it efficient, it could really allow us to compete with the lower cost of food that we find abroad. And that's one of the issues why food security is always an issue. And we saw what happened when we rely too much on cheaper food from abroad. But then what happens now when that gets disrupted? We had COVID, we had a war, war's still going on, and more wars can happen. Let's not forget. Last story, quick. And this is interesting. Deputy Chief Secretary Dr. Faith B. Israel, she has been given permission, I believe, by High Court Judge Frank Sipasa to challenge the legality of a search warrant at her home over the AudioGate issue, which I believe did not include her voice. So it's interesting that her personal home was included in the search over that fiasco. The voices, I believe, was the Chief Secretary and the Secretary of Education that was heard. I don't know if there was any more to the recordings than that, right? And as far as I'm aware, the Deputy Chief Secretary herself has been somewhat on the periphery of this issue. She has not been central to it. With that said, even if she was central to it, I have no issue with this whatsoever. None whatsoever, because again, there are too many questions with regards to not just the integrity of our office holders, but then also the integrity of all of the various processes that is supposed to hold them into account, that is supposed to keep them in check. That is, and those processes, when working properly, and this is, again, I always say it, transparency works for you. Those processes, when working properly, when we can have confidence in it, then that confidence is translated directly into confidence for office holders. Because the checks and balances, if they're working, we can trust, we can have faith, no pun intended, that they themselves are acting in good faith, no pun intended again. Now, I have no issue because at the very least, let her challenge it. Let her challenge it if there were any issues, and hopefully it won't be like some kind of minor technicality that she wouldn't challenge by that wouldn't really tell us anything. Then we won't learn anything, and good for her, yes, but it won't really mean anything for us. But hopefully, maybe things could be uncovered with regards to how this investigation went down. It might show that the investigation had validity. It might show issues with the investigation and, ironically, the integrity of the investigation. More transparency is good for us. It is not necessarily good for the people in high office, or at least that's what they think, or at least that's what we will perceive based on their behavior. Now, let's end things here. Let's go on a break, and when we come back, we will actually hear a little bit on things like this from a dear old friend to the nation. Stay tuned. This is Talk About on WESN. Show my gospel there. We'll be right back.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion.
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. And there are two people who my co-host holds with high regard with regards to the politics of our nation. And that is one, Mr. Patrick Manning, and one, Mr. Basil Pandey. And of course, we went further into it. One of our callers had a question, why we always putting down the current generation. And he thought we were putting down the new ones, the young politicians who are now starting out. And that wasn't the case. What we were doing was we were lamenting with regards to, okay, here we had these two icons who perhaps we underestimated or we took for granted what we had when we had them. And then now we have maybe buyer's remorse as we question, did we advance? Did we build upon what we had, or did we regress? Because of the behavior in Parliament. And to be fair, and again, one could argue just because other people are doing something stupid doesn't mean you could do something stupid too. But to be fair, I have seen this in the legislative bodies around the world, what it has come down to, the ridiculous comedy show, from watching the opposition, repeatedly lambast the Canadian Prime Minister over his ethical violations, despite the fact that he's still elected, good luck there, to what's going on in North America, where, you have two candidates who, I'll be honest, I don't understand how that was even possible. And even in Europe, the United Kingdom at one point had a revolving door for prime ministers, right? And the political situation in Germany and France at times, I think, stresses out those two heads of state. But today should be the state funeral of one Basil Pandey. And I wanted to share a brief anecdote of my first interaction, and I can't remember if it might have been my only interaction with Mr. Pandey. At the time, WSN was a news station. And the main morning show, the first morning show that we had, well, technically it wasn't the first, but we won't speak of that one. Bread and butter, we were now starting out. Keaton was on air for maybe, a couple of months. I myself was then pegged at the time, I didn't have a role, so I was brought on to be a production assistant for Bread and Butter. And within probably a few weeks of starting to book guests for the show, Keaton, I believe, came to me and he just, brought up, well, why don't we try to get Pandey? And I said, okay. And naive me looked in whatever databases we had, found Mr. Pandey's number, called him, and I asked him for an interview, and I believe it would have been at about 7 o'clock in the morning or before 7. It would have been before 7. It could have been 6:30 or 6:40. And he said yes. And I remember how easy it was to make the request of Mr. Pandey. He made no fuss about it. He said yes. I think I might have called him the next morning or the afternoon before to remind him. He said, yes, of course. And then he appeared on the show. And he was frank, gracious, affable. It was good to see him. And we were potentially hoping to see more of him. And history will show that we didn't necessarily maybe see as much as we would like with him on the public sphere. But I just found, you know, at that time I was well aware that there was a lot of gracious people in high places, and a lot of gracious people who are icons of our nation. But there are also those who are difficult, and I'm very happy to say that Mr. Pandey was one of the gracious ones, who was willing to come and speak and do his small part. So, we have a small clip from that first interview there on BNB. It's time to cue this.
He is the founding father of the United National Congress, and he is, of course, the former Prime Minister, former opposition leader, and former chairman of the United National Congress. We welcome our very special guest, Mr. Bastio Pandey. What is that new kind of politics that you spoke of, or you referred to?
First of all, we inherited the Westminster system, which was totally unsuited to us. There is need for constitutional reform, but as long as there is no reform, we have to operate within the existing system. And our country is a country that has been traditionally divided, basically along racial, ethnic, class lines, and so on. This country cannot go forward unless we can unite all the forces. And the only way you can do that is if you have constitutional reform. But neither the government nor the opposition wants constitutional reform. They prefer to continue with the racial politics.
Earlier this year, your daughter, Michaela Pandey, would have launched her political party, the Patriotic Front.
You believe Patriotic Front could be probably one of the entities to, as you say, fill that particular void, fill that vacuum?
Well, it is the only thing on the horizon. For example, you remember what took place in the last general elections. There were, I don't know how many small parties that fought the elections. They all lost their deposits. The people, the voters of this country, the electorate, are not interested in little parties. They are interested in a united, strong party. And I think if one of that emerges, I think there is hope for this country. We have tried on several occasions as a people in order to unite. For example, starting with the Workers' and Farmers' Party, and then the United Labour Front, and then with the NAR. We are plagued with this division, this racial division in the society, but people are becoming more and more conscious that the only way forward is unity. And I think we have 5 years in which to show whether that is possible. And I think it is.
You represent an era, a political heavyweight. I've always seen the reaction to you when you go to the CPL at the Brian Lara Stadium. You are given an amazing applause every time your name is mentioned, and every time people see you, the young people want to take a selfie. So they see you as one of the living icons, the legends of the political game. A lot of people would have seen that and reacted that way too with Mr. Patrick Manning, now deceased. And people were even taken aback to know of the relationship that you two had, being political rivals, but also very cordial. Talk to me.
School brothers, yeah.
Yes.
School, yeah.
Was it a presentation thing, or was it talk to me about that relationship with you and deceased Mr. Manning?
In politics, people have different views. The fact that I have a different view from you doesn't mean you're my enemy. The fact that I'm in one party and you're another, you're a political opponent, you're not an enemy. And if I meet you, why can't I treat you cordially? When we're in Parliament, we argue to the best of our ability. That is our job. But when we're outside, why do I have to hate you and spite you and say malicious things about you? Whatever our history has been, it is not useless if we can build on it. We can't change it. You can't change yesterday, it's gone. And you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The object is, what do you do today, having regard to all the circumstances? And change will come. It has always come. It is said that the, change is the only constant.
How would you like to be remembered when that name Basdio Pandey is mentioned in the history books of Trinidad and Tobago?
As the fellow who tried.
Mr. Pandey, your final closing words.
Feel free, talk to the nation.
I will never stop fighting to make my country a better place to live in, as long as I have life. I wish this country well. I hope the recent events have provided an opportunity for us to go forward. And I certainly will do my best.
Rest in peace, Mr. Pandey. I promise you there are people still fighting. Let's take a break.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the Home Store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue St. Anne's, WESN 30A Gattaca Street Woodbrook, Metropolitan Bookshop Ariapita Avenue Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it.
It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Talk About, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, crime is always an important issue. Maybe it's too important these days. However, to help speak to us, communicate with us what's going on from the perspective of DTBS, we have one of their media ambassadors, as always. Although today is not his normal day, but, you know, we'll make do here with ASP Ashraf Ali. Good morning, sir. It is great to see you. Happy New Year. This is, you know, the first I've seen you since Christmas, I think.
Thank you very much, and and Happy New Year to you and the entire staff of WSN. It's good to be here again. All right, New Year, new things happening.
New things?
New things. The only problem, the challenge we continue to see is that with everything new, like some things just remain the same.
That was one of the things I was lamenting on yesterday, that the murder rate has continued. And perhaps, you know, it's one of those things where we take it for granted. Oh, it's a new year. Yeah, but in the grand scheme of things, we just changed, you know, a date, the number and the month name. But it's not as though 2023 is disconnected from January the 2nd, 2024.
And so true. And to add to the whole mix is that we are in the carnival period.
Yes.
We are leading up into the carnival on a couple of days, and as a result of that, we expect to see a lot of more activities taking place, such as fetes, persons be much more on the road. I mean, persons would want to go to different areas to visit. We still have shopping. We still have a lot of shopping taking place because the school is in fact open. So we have that aspect of it where you have a lot of children in school, out of school. So we still have the issue with children who finish school and all the other little issues that we normally get around after school opens. I mean, we are hoping that we don't have any sort of increases in terms of any negative actions with school children, and we see fights, something escalating again. We are hoping for that. That's not
one of the things that I'm curious about, because I was speaking to one of the other contributors on the show, it seemed as though, and maybe it's because this year, of course, Easter is so much closer, so Carnival is before Valentine's Day, which is slightly unique. I've known Carnival to be like just after, and that's close enough, right? But it caused fetes to start even during December. Usually there's a little bit of a break. Rarely Carnival season might start as early as August, July. But fetes, there were fetes in December. Have you all seen like a different level of activity, and have there been more concerns about that level of activity as the carnival potentially encroached more on Christmas, and the lead up might be more with the accelerated period?
Well, when you look at the number of events that is carded, when you go on social media, you see that a lot of persons are promoting their events coming up and scheduling the events coming up. We have anticipated that anticipated a rise in the number of events crunched in this small period.
Right.
So we will end up with a lot of days that we may have multiple events coming closer to the weekends. Right.
Okay.
A lot of persons tend to have the fetes along that.
Some might be on top of each other.
Yes, and multiple events within an area. Right, so let's say Port of Spain Division and Western Division, we know there are venues between those areas that on some days we may have events happening in the west into Port of Spain, and that creates a dynamic for us where we have a number of persons coming in, we have a number of issues that we want to continue to have. Traffic is always a concern in terms of the general public as well as the residents who live in a particular area. They are always inconvenienced from that perspective. But then you look at the fetes. And our historical data, even from last year, show that the amount of youths now going to attend a fete, young people attending fete, and even we have persons who know, like we said, we expect that if the persons don't heed the call that we continue to say about the indiscriminate parking, we may have a number of stolen vehicles.
Right, okay.
We hope we continue to reinforce the use of alcohol responsibly and the context of drinking and driving. That's an offense.
Is there any concern that because things are so crunched, that behaviors might be a little bit more reckless because people, we have to hit all these fetes, no time off, no breaks, because when you're younger, I'm sure your friends was the same way too. It's like sleep is for the weak.
Well, that's another dynamic that we have to take into consideration, because persons may want to go to multiple fetes, and yes, they may want to enjoy themselves. So we're not stopping anybody from enjoying themselves. We are just asking persons to be responsible enough in this environment. Parents who have teenagers and they are now venturing to these fetes, they have to be very conscious and cautious about the current environment. If you're going together, go together in a group, right? Make sure that when you go together in the group that goes together, make sure the entire group comes back together, right? Because you don't want to, when you go there, this one meets somebody and they'll leave when something happens and they don't know where this individual is. I mean, that's a responsibility of your group. And we hope that parents would understand that when your children is going to these events, you pay some attention. If they know they're supposed to give them a time to come back and they not reach back at a particular time, ask, find out what's going on. I mean, that is your child. Be concerned in that context, right? Speak to them about using alcohol and mixing alcohol with other substances. You can't stop it per se, because in those environments it's there, so the opportunities are there, but you need to have the conversation.
I think, just so people don't misunderstand you, like statistically, you could say don't do it as much as you want, and then you could try to get parents to say don't do it to their children as much as they want, and as much as you would like them to do so. But statistically, once the sample size is large enough, something will slip through the cracks and it would happen, and parents kind of need to be aware, okay, we will do our best, but if this does happen now, things have to, measures for safety and precautions have to be in place for that.
Yeah, and so that's only the social side in terms of parents' responsibility towards their children. Then on the other side, we have corporate responsibilities. I mean, you have events that are taking place, and I'm asking that whether promoters be responsible. If you know you're seeing certain type of behavior of children, don't just allow them to purchase the alcohol. you realize that they can't drink anymore. It's not your fault, right? But have some measures in place that you know this is enough for them, right? Carpooling is an important thing now. What we need to understand the context of carpooling, because at the same time we have the challenges where you're not going to bring somebody to pick up your, you call someone to pick you up and they're not responsible enough to pick you up.
Course.
So we have to look at it from a whole perspective.
So this is similar to when we had the vacation period, both July, August, and then the Christmas vacation, where it's like the responsibility, you have to know exactly who you're entrusting, potentially a minor or very young adult, 18, 19, whoever, who not all 18, 19-year-olds could navigate the world enough to just be totally independent. You need to know who you're trusting your family members with.
And that's an important thing. Not because you are legally 18, it means that you are, in quote unquote, a responsible adult. You may just be legally 18, but your level of experience in the world will be less than that of some persons. Right? Might be some person younger than you, have more experience, have been, or I should say, has a lot more street sense than some. So you have to understand your limitations, right? And parents need to do that also.
I saw this on a TV show, but it made a lot of sense to me, ironically, in that the parents told the daughter, look, one of the rules was don't be in a car with a teenage driver. And this is not even with alcohol or partying or anything, right? And what happened was the child in the story was in an accident because of just not any big set of recklessness, but it was an inexperienced driver. Now, of course, we obviously fitting alcohol in the mix, fatigue in the mix. Should parents or responsible older friends even look at the young people, their young friends, or their children, their young adult children even, and be like, hold on, let's not now, like you said, assume that you can manage yourself. Let's have somebody a little bit older, a little bit more experienced to kind of deal with this for you, whether it's transportation or what have you.
Well, from the perspective of the police, all we can do is just share the information and urge the public and even parents to look at those type of situations. You need to know your child. You need to know what your child is capable of. You need to know who your child friends are when they go into the fetes, and who are allowing them to go to parties, and just to go out driving a vehicle, going out. So you need to know your space. Your space.
There's also the fact that, look, your child, now we could go into minors. Your child might be going out to do something not related to carnival, but certain areas of the country will be on that footing, and things can happen. You don't have to be the drunk driver. You could be in a car that's hit by a drunk driver. So even now, just your movement patterns and how late you stay and where you go, you should be reconsidering or putting things in place for that?
Well, those are some of the conversations you need to have. At the end of the day, there's a lot out there that we can speak about in terms of do's and don'ts, right? As we go closer to Carnival, we will just extend some of the conversation.
Yes.
But no, we know 2023, we ended with a number of road fatalities. And into a Carnival period where we know we have alcohol is going to be used more so out of the Christmas period into the New Year's, now into the Carnival, a lot of activities. I'm not saying that the alcohol alone contributes to the accident, so I'm not being critical of anybody who wants to enjoy alcoholic beverages. That's their choice. But what I'm saying is that drinking and driving, or being under the influence of alcohol in a capacity that you would be unable to effectively manage a vehicle or handle yourself on the road, it's a risk that you're taking. Now, you may come out of the vehicle not wrong in an accident, someone may bounce you, but you're under the influence of alcohol, and then we could end up in a situation with a road rage.
Right.
right? And those things are real, right? We do have statistical data and information that those type of things do in fact happen. That, I mean, it's real. And over the years, we have been saying about drinking and driving, it's an offense. Now, we also have speeding, but persons need to understand, when we share information about the type of vehicles that have been stolen, if you, as a young driver, driving one of these type of vehicles, you have to be very careful where you park these type of vehicles. The models of vehicles that we have been indicating that has been stolen, right? Kia vans, Tidas, Almeras, Nissans. These are the vehicles that they're stealing, right? We have some SUVs that they normally steal also. So if you know you're driving those type of vehicles, you're not going to park them vehicles anywhere. It is safer to carpool to go to the events. Because let's be real, number of venues in Trinidad and Tobago where these events are taking place do not have sufficient parking facilities.
And you end up on a sidewalk.
And you park on the roadways, you park in particular any area in and around the venue, and you proceed to the event. After having a good time, there's an opportunity presented itself. Persons may choose to, then you come back and you find out your vehicle gone.
Yeah.
Somebody decide to take the vehicle and go with it, because why? It's not properly secured in any environment.
And you can get anti-theft devices. I would caution people, obviously what you said there, cars that are known to be stolen, you have to be extra precautious. But even if your car is not known to be stolen, we actually had a car stolen from us where we didn't think it was being stolen. If you give the opportunity and you make it too easy, somebody eventually is going to take it.
And that's the whole thing. If you would not understand the environment that you are in and what is happening in your environment, and you're not conscious about it or self-aware of your personal safety and security, you may make bad decisions, and regrettable ones at the same time.
Speaking of bad decisions, talking about cars, but you mentioned road rage, and before we go to the break, I wanted to bring this up. Of course, alcohol, and you could get into a situation at a party, at a fete. Is there any concerns with regards to, we've seen the level of violence in the country in some respects, right? It's not that everybody is going to pull out a lethal weapon, you know, once you piss somebody off, but we've seen violence escalate. Any concerns about that? Just in general over the carnival period?
Now, we have noted that, and certain areas, like when we're having these events and particular type of events, we will be escalating our patrols and our measures in and around those venues, because there is an anticipation and we know there is a conflict, and in certain areas there may have some fallouts in certain things. One of the unfortunate situation that happened on Arapita Avenue.
Yeah.
Right. Where persons go to enjoy themselves, war infractions or persons who have conflict with each other may have seen an individual in a location and take an opportunity to inflict some harm on the individual. But at the end of the day, that you may miss your target, as this case may be, and we have collateral damages where innocent individuals would have gotten injured. And those type of things that we are trying to mitigate against by ensuring that during those periods where we expect heightened activities of different type of things happening in those areas, that we have a heightened presence of police officers in and around those areas.
Well, all right, we need to take a break here. All I will say, you don't need to respond to this, but all I will say is, once again, I have concerns. How much are we going to ask the manpower of the TTPS? And we've had criticisms about some of the members of the TTPS, but at the end of the day, the operational tempo over the last, 4 years has been pretty high without breaks. And I don't know, how well this is going to go if we keep making these demands and having these expectations on hours and manpower. But I'll leave that there. That's just one of many concerns over all of the situations that we have. Let's take a break. When we come back, this is Talking Point on WSN. We'll open the phone lines. When I hear from you, the viewer, of course, the SP will be with me to answer any of your questions that you may have or any queries. Stay tuned to Talking Point. We'll be right back.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you do now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. ASPLE, acting ASPLE? Still acting. That's unfortunate. Make this man pay or not. Anyway, he's here with us. He will be willing to answer your questions, of course, as well as you could ask about what's going on with the TTPS. You could ask him about crime, and of course, he is not necessarily the shot caller at the top of the pyramid, so he will answer what he can. You could also ask about other topics that we have ongoing there, as well as if you want to call in and, give your well wishes to the Bazio Pandey's family. That's fine as well, of course, today being his state funeral. It's a hell of a thing. I think even for me, as much as I've said it, I kind of like, why don't we appreciate people while they're still here? Why do we wait until after they're gone? Even myself, to some extent, you don't know what you have until it's gone. And we had a clip, I don't know if you saw it.
I did.
And I found it quite incredible because it's not as though we did a lot of prep with regards to what we were going to ask and what he was going to say. And it's not as though he's like on the campaign trail talking to the public, 18 times a day. This just came from him at 6:30 in the morning.
It's very interesting in terms of the conversation that we are having now, and condolences to Mr. Pandey and his immediate family. But the conversation in Trinidad and Tobago is about legacy. It's important, and I'm just using the context of legacy. Not legacy from the public life figures alone. What legacy are we as parents, we as leaders, in our own sphere, living for our children, our grandchildren in that context? What are we teaching our children? Moral and ethical values, standards. What are we going to teach our children for the future? Are we leaving it up to our leaders to do it, or do we have a responsibility to our own children, in our community, to set that standard or leave a legacy from that perspective? You don't have to be in public life alone to leave legacies.
Because when he was talking about still fighting as long as he's alive, some people might think, oh well, a politician is saying that's for them. But no, it wasn't just for them. It's the ordinary citizen, right? That has to put some effort in, and it's multiple ways. And of course, to some extent, people would assume you're referring directly to you know, developing young people so they don't
Yes.
turn up into criminals. That's one.
No,
that's definitely one
that-
aspect. But just developing in general.
Just developing in general, right? And that is a key with it. We look up to public figures and persons in the public life and criticize their decision-making, do's and don'ts. But we're not looking to in any introspection about ourselves, whether or not we are contributing to the whole cycle of whether or not when we pass on, what legacy are we leaving from in our own areas of control? We are not, right?
And it's not just if you have kids.
No, it's not that.
It's the people you meet along the way, your neighbors, your co-workers, your friends.
Even in a community, in your workplace, how do you be? And all of these add up to whether or not, or what type of society that we really have. Yeah?
This might be a bit beyond what you're accustomed to, but do you think we have an issue? I lament the fact that a lot of our systems are geared towards people becoming followers, because you know our examination process is standardized. You need to pass this exam. And then, yes, you might go into university, and yes, some people might show leadership traits, but then when you enter the workforce, whether it's police, fire, private business, right? You know, in any industry, when you're an entry-level worker, and in some respects, especially in the private sector, you're not hired to think, you're hired to say yes. You're hired to do what you're told to do. And to some extent, we kind of assume leadership is this grand thing, and we kind of figured, well, no, what about the personal initiative, right? To be a good example, to be a good support, and what it boils down to where you started off, and it comes back down to the legacy you will leave.
But we tend to use the concept of followers as in a negative context.
Well, true.
But we all cannot be leaders. We all cannot be followers. But the question is, if I realize that I am following something that is wrong, am I to blindly continue following, or am I to step up and say, no, I am not going to follow this? It's a question that you have to do some introspection and decide, where am I going to draw the line? Because if I say that we only have to follow, and whatever the person who is doing is wrong, and I know fully well it's wrong, everything is saying is wrong, but I'm still following because they say I have to follow, that something is wrong with you individually.
Cynics might look at you and say, well, why more people in the police don't, speak out? But it's not just that. There's the fact that at the end of the day, for a lot of things in the country, I would say that we look at what our leaders do, whether it's community, political, national, right? Whether it's a political party, whether it's a non-political organization, and we accept a lot, we tolerate a lot, we let people get away with a lot, and then, oh my gosh, why is everything so bad? Well, it's because we weren't necessarily willing to speak out about things, right? And sometimes it might even be easier for a private citizen to speak out about the issues, those types of issues for them, than it might be someone in public office to try to speak out about all the technical things that might be going wrong in that field.
And with speaking out, in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, we said we have this saying, see something, say something.
Yes.
It's basically simply saying that if you find something is wrong, speak out about it. It does not always have to be about crime. It was really designed for, if you see a criminal activity, but we take it in the bigger context. Something is wrong, say it is wrong.
One of the things that I've said before, and I'll keep saying this, all of my criticisms for the police service aside, people still need to engage with the police, to help the police, to be willing to give information to the police, to communicate to the police. And as much as we weren't going about crime there, that whole topic about being afraid to speak out, is it because we feel it, just people in my sphere feel it more now, like the risk involved, because you see the level of violence, and to some extent, the brazenness behind it. Is there any concerns over the fact that the public might become even more fearful, and they might just, be less participatory in the process, which is very much needed for them to participate in?
So it has, you have two sides to that story. or that concept, I should say. In one side, yes, I understand persons might be a bit hesitant too because they may be afraid in the environment that they live in. Speaking out might put them at a little more risk than they should have been in. But on the opposite side, are you willing to continue to or sacrifice your freedom and all your moral and ethical values to continue not speaking out and just remain in that space? That's a decision an individual has to make. We can come here on a regular basis and ask persons, and we share information with you, with the general public about all the different criminal activities, safety and security tips of a lot of things. But if you do not heed some of them and consider the messaging, not the messengers, forget the messengers.
Right.
Because the messengers might be the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. The messages that we are sending out, it's for general. It is not targeted towards one set of group of individuals or a community. It's general information for everybody. But you have to be willing to accept and understand that the information that we are sharing and we continue to share is for the benefit of yourself, and in the wider, in the bigger scheme of it, is the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago. At the end of the day, only this morning I was listening that there is the Canadian Embassy did in fact put out some alerts with the respect of a kidnapping and all kinds like that, right? And it was it does not sound nice than when other countries speak about your country in that light, even though we know that there was only one incident over a couple of years, right? But once it is there, it can't take it back.
Or rather, you know, that's what they perceive.
Right.
And shouldn't we try to figure out why is it that they perceive it this way? Because it's a safety warning. You can't fault people for being precautious.
The cruise ship season started.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have in Port of Spain Division and all the other, the TTPS in general, where these persons and Ministry of Tourism have put a lot of systems in place to ensure the safety and security of all visiting persons from the cruise. Today we have another cruise coming in, and you will see the heightened amount of police officers in and around Port of Spain and in other areas where they're going to visit, just to ensure that the integrity of our country remains, that when they go back, they feel the experience and they could say something positive on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago.
I'm not too sure how this worked with regards to Trinidad, because I wasn't necessarily involved with tourism in Trinidad, but I always felt that, at least in Tobago, you know, criminals were not necessarily going to go and interfere with tourists, right? It's a different thing when someone was living here long term and got involved with things maybe they should not have got involved with. But now, I do wonder, you know, as other things that were somewhat left alone by criminals are now being touched by violence, you know, this is a very real concern.
And what you don't want is when tourists or anybody visit Trinidad, and even in the city of Port of Spain, that they go to a certain area where they believe they're okay, and some incident takes place. That one incident is enough.
The repercussions.
To cause a whole different set of repercussions along the line.
It's not that the tourist's life is more valuable.
No,
but what it means is it will hamper industry, right? And it will be a diminishing returns even for the criminals themselves, because it's not as though people will still be visiting to be a victim. Folks, the phone lines are open. Feel free to interrupt the discussions. But while that's going on, I wanted to go back to what you're saying about speaking out. Do you think it's reasonable to say that some people might underestimate the fact that, yes, I'm afraid of speaking out now because something might happen to me in the short term, but they don't necessarily see in the long run how things could slowly move downward. It's not as perceptible. It's easier to ignore. And perhaps maybe even that's why our murder rate is where it is, because we just kind of assume, well, it'll stay under 100. Then it'll stay, you know, just over 100. Then it'll stay at around 300. Then it'll stay under 5. And now we've reached 6. And to some extent, you know, we can't just expect the police to redouble their redoubled efforts, right? Especially if we are not willing to do the part that's necessary.
And I agree. So in terms of speaking out or say say something. It's important to understand the context in which we're asking the public to share information with the police, because at some point in time, it may be some friend, family, relative, or somebody you know who was involved in something, and that small piece of information that you would have shared with the police would add to that investigation that could have assisted in arresting or detaining that individual or prevent that individual from committing a crime.
Important, folks. Do we have a caller from Santa Cruz? Good morning. Or did we lose the call? Caller, please call back. I'm very sorry. Santa Cruz, hello?
Yes, I'm
here. Oh,
here.
hi, caller. Yes, okay.
Oh, okay. Good morning.
Morning.
There's a lot of static on the line. Good morning, gentlemen. I am so happy that the inspector brought up this Canadian travel advisory, because the presentation of it was a scathing report when I heard that on the news last night. And I only hope that the pertinent ministries, tourism, the security office of the Prime Minister Information, because somebody's got to open their mouths and say something. Too often, there's a bad report about Trinidad and Tobago, and there is no response from anybody in Trinidad and Tobago to refute and change the image that's being presented. It's said, and it's just left at that with no one saying anything. And we who live here know that it's really not that drastic. But people that live outside don't know this. This is all the information they're getting. So I'm hoping that we up our game on the PR strategy and start doing what's necessary. Because yes, we have a major income earning opportunity right on our doorstep. And if people who want to come to TNT for Carnival are hearing all of this, it's going to change flights. I mean, there's a whole trickle-down domino effect that's going to happen. So I really hope that a PR strategy is put in place and we act on it immediately. And just one thing about followers and leaders. In my opinion, everyone is a leader in their own sphere, right? But of course, when in the larger picture, you have to have someone to lead with others who follow. But at the same time, too, when talking about you as a follower doing exactly what you're told to do, or if you don't like it, then stand up, say something, or don't do it, then I think about the military. And when soldiers have to go into a place and do things to people that shouldn't be done, what do? That they're following orders, and sometimes the orders don't. The math doesn't add up. The math doesn't match. All right, I'll go and listen off air. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I pray that we have a safe time in Trinidad and Tobago, and it continues.
Thank you, Ms. Santa Cruz. Two good points there. I think PR is something that is not necessarily a strong point of the country on a whole, whether private or public. So that's an important to note. And I don't think for everybody else who might have heard the caller's remarks, it's not about spinning the situation and manipulating the situation. It's about giving a reasonable response to put it in a reasonable context. But with regards to leaders and followers, I'll just say, there's something about, yes, being a follower, but knowing how to follow while exercising personal initiative, right? Not just being somebody who could blindly, I just need instructions and that's all I could do, right? That's not really helping the leader. And I guess to some extent now it's semantics. That might be leadership type qualities, but in the role of a follower, exercising personal initiative responsibly and reasonably as a follower for the greater good. And maybe that especially might be something that a lot of people are not necessarily thinking about, because We just kind of see the roles of, well, the leader makes the decisions and the followers just blindly follow the decisions. And that's a lot of our business, politics, etc., etc. That's just how it is.
Well,
and it's limited. It limits us.
And we do, in fact, have a lot of those type of things where people just follow. All right, and they're not stepping in, they're not stepping up and saying it is wrong. In many of our
just to emphasize the point, that's not an excuse in the law. You can't just say, well, I was just following him.
No, it is not. It's not an excuse. It's not an excuse. And if you look at it, let me give an example. Let's say, as we was talking about safety and security and carnival-related incidents, if you know that you're going in a vehicle and the driver is under the influence, are you going to go into that vehicle knowing fully well that that driver may not be able to reach you home safely, or you all would not be reaching home safely? Or is it that because that is a driver and that is your only form of transportation you need to go home with, you decide to take that risk?
And I mean, okay, I can understand maybe you don't feel you could have that conversation in the heat of the moment and he's inebriated, but shouldn't there be those kind of things, you should have those conversations before
you even reach to the event. So that is what I'm saying. So that's why we're trying to reinforce that there are a lot of things that you need to do in your planning to go to these events.
Is it that people, because I don't know how to fully explain this, but you know, like when you bring up concerns and it's like, don't be a worrywart, things don't have to be so complicated, right? This is simple, we're just going out to have a good time. And it's like, maybe we need to reconsider life now, and that, no, it's not so simple now. You know, these things happen too frequently, and we do need to be a bit more conscious of it.
The thing about it is, who is going to be the responsible adult at that point in time if everybody is not?
When you're fetting with your friends, who wants to be the mom or dad of the group?
And that is the risk or the risk factor associated with that.
But I guess, is it fair to say that on some level we're kind of stupid, because if something bad happens, wouldn't more or less everybody regret that somebody didn't step up to be the mom or dad in the friend group?
Well, that is where the individual and all the parties together with their families and friends will have to live the rest of their life wondering. And are you willing to take the chance of living the rest of your life wondering that? Or you could have simply made a good decision by saying, listen, I'm not going to, we getting somebody to drive?
I mean, how common is it? I guess I'm just trying to ask, like...
Let's put it this way.
I'm sure in your time in uniform, you probably have seen at least one or two incidents where these things were preventable, and it's very impressive.
There is, in fact, a lot of incidents where, not serious incidents, so that may cause a lot of persons to say nothing happening.
Right.
Right? But you do, in fact, have a lot of persons under the influence who are driving on their way home. When you look at the number of persons that we have been arrested and charged for drinking and driving under the influence, right? And the number of persons for every, and this is not actual data, but just an example, for every one person that we may have stopped, it may have about 10 or 15 other persons who would have been under the influence, and because we were in this location, the persons got away.
Right.
I'm not saying that everybody who drink and drive is going to get involved in an accident, serious or otherwise, but the potential is there. And if we continue along that line, I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I don't think anybody knows what tomorrow is going to bring. It only takes one simple millisecond or a second of some bad judgment that you're regretted for the rest of your life.
I think it's safe to say, you do it once, you get away with it, don't think you could do it again. Take your lucky break and, be more responsible next time, because why stack the odds against you?
That's all we continue to say, because you cannot arrest and charge a man who is dead. So this is not about the police trying to enforce or enforcing the law because if the person die.
Yeah.
So if you are the only individual in the vehicle and you die, unfortunately, you pay the ultimate cost already. right? You lost a life. But what about when other persons, other users on the road lost their life, persons get seriously injured, and you, the individual who decided or made that decision to drive that vehicle or operate that vehicle under the influence of alcohol and cause an accident, you are affecting multiple individuals at the same time, not only your family. So as much as we continue, and we'll continue to reinforce this, because any loss of life is in fact a difficult situation for anyone. And it not only affects the immediate family, there are a lot of persons that it affects holistically across the board.
Well, Officer ASP Ali, we will of course have more to talk about. There's a lot of things with regards to carnival safety and precautions that we haven't mentioned today. But thanks for coming to speak to me, and you know, we don't have much time before it's all over, and hopefully people will heed the warnings. As I always say, ASP Ali comes and tells you essentially this is what happens, and then it really, really bothers me when I see victims of crime in the papers with the exact thing that ASP Ali was warning us against from doing. Now, with that said, time to wrap the show. I just want to make mention, of course, politically speaking, this upcoming general election, one of the names that was, you know, always in the back of my mind, wondering exactly what she would do, of course, was Michaela Pandey, right? And with the passing of her father, now I guess that question has come to the forefront in the national sphere. And I would just want to go on the record now and say I hope that Ms. Pandey would be willing to take up her father's legacy and to keep fighting. And who knows what that might look like when it's all said and done, whether it's in politics or whether it's in commentary or what have you, or just being a community leader. But we need more people to step up, and I do think potentially she can, as many others can, and hopefully, you know, as we remember Mr. Pandey, we will all look at his example, you know, all of the good and the bad, and perhaps say, we need to now step up because we've lost an icon, and it's difficult for any one person to replace his shoes. Of course, as my coach always says, make today a good day, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Looking at those images live, James, as you were talking there, of Atal shaking hands with the outgoing Prime Minister Elizabeth Bourne. They're going in now for their private discussions. James, just before we let you go,